Picture a skinny kid, barely taller than the ball he's chasing, running barefoot down the cracked streets of Funchal. That's Cristiano Ronaldo, long before the stadiums roared his name, back when soccer wasn't just a game. It was his heartbeat. Born on February 5th, 1985, in Madeira, he didn't come into a world of green fields or shiny cleats. His was a dusty alley, a makeshift ball, and a passion so fierce it burned through every hardship. I want to take you back to those early days to see how a boy's love for soccer wasn't just play. It was destiny calling loud and clear. Ronaldo didn't choose soccer, it chose him. At 3 or 4, while other kids were stacking blocks or chasing kites, he was kicking anything round he could find: a rolled-up sock, a tin can, a bundle of rags tied with string. His mom, Maria Dolores, used to laugh through her exhaustion, saying, "That boy came out running, not walking." He'd toddle after his big brother Hugo, begging to join the older boys on the street. They'd shove him aside. He was too small, too young, but he'd sneak back, eyes wide, waiting for a chance to steal the ball. By 5, he was hooked. School didn't hold him. The classroom felt like a cage. He'd ditch lessons, dodge teachers, and sprint to the nearest patch of dirt where the boys played. "I wasn't good with books," he'd say later, a faint smile tugging at his lips, "but give me a ball, and I'd show you who I was." His feet moved like they had a mind of their own, quick, clever, unstoppable. Neighbors started whispering, "That Aveiro kid, he's got something special." At 7, Ronaldo joined Andorinha, a scrappy little club where his dad hauled kits and swept floors. It wasn't a fancy setup, just a patchy field with rusty goals, but to him, it was paradise. He showed up in borrowed shoes, too big or too torn, laces flapping as he ran. The bigger boys laughed at first, calling him Crybaby, because he'd sob if they lost or didn't pass. But when the ball hit his feet, the laughter stopped. He'd weave through them like a shadow, left, right, a sudden burst, and slam shots that rattled the net. He was small, but fierce, his first coach said, like he was born with a fire no one could put out. His talent wasn't just speed or tricks, it was hunger. Every kick carried a weight, a promise. He'd chase loose balls like his life depended on it, tackle kids twice his size, and get back up when they knocked him down. Tears streaked his dusty face, but he'd grit his teeth and keep going. "I hated losing," he'd admit. It felt like the world ended. That wasn't childish whining. It was the spark of a champion, already glowing in a boy too young to know where it had taken him. In Madeira, soccer wasn't a luxury. It was survival, especially for Ronaldo. He didn't have a real ball. His family couldn't afford it. He'd stuff socks with rags, tie them tight, and kick that lumpy thing against walls until it fell apart. The streets were his stadium, uneven slabs of stone, potholes waiting to trip him up, but he danced over them, barefoot half the time because shoes wore out faster than his mom could mend them. "I played till dark," he'd recall, "till my mom yelled me home." That rag ball wasn't just a toy, it was his escape. In a house where hunger gnawed and his dad's drinking hung heavy, soccer gave him air. He'd lose himself in it, hours blurring as he dribbled past imaginary foes, dreaming of stadiums he'd never seen. His sister Katia once said he'd talk to that ball like it was his friend, and it was his only friend some days, a lifeline when the world felt too small and too hard. Even at 8 or 9, Ronaldo played like he knew something bigger was out there. He'd watch the older boys, study their moves, then try them himself, over and over until he got it right. His dribbles weren't just fast, they were smart, twisting past legs with a rhythm that felt natural, effortless. He didn't kick like a kid, a teammate remembered. He kicked like he owned the game. At Andorinha, he'd score goals that left parents shaking their heads. Shots from angles no one expected, bursts of speed that turned dust into a blur. The nickname Crybaby stuck, but it hid a truth. He cared more than anyone. If his team lost, he'd sit there, fists clenched, replaying every miss in his head. If they won, he'd grin wide, but you could see him itching for the next game, the next challenge. "I wanted to be the best," he'd say later, and even then, you could feel it, a kid with patched-up clothes and a rag ball, already chasing greatness. By 10, he moved to Nacional, a better club on the island. Money was still tight. His boots were hand-me-downs, his stomach often empty, but on the field he was untouchable. Coaches saw it. The way he'd take on 3 defenders at once, the way he'd shoot with power that belied his skinny frame. He was raw, but you couldn't teach what he had, one said. He'd stay late, kicking against walls, perfecting his aim, while other kids went home. Hunger drove him, not just for food, but for something more, something beyond the cliffs of Madeira. His mom saw it too. She'd stand by the sidelines, aprons still tied from work, watching her boy run like the wind. He was different, she'd say, her voice thick with pride. His dad, sober some days, would nod from the shadows. Ronaldo didn't just love soccer. He lived it, breathed it, let it burn through the cold nights and empty plates. At 12, when he left for Sporting Lisbon, that flame was already ablaze, lighting a path out of poverty. But back then, on those dusty streets, it was just a boy and his ball, a passion so deep it wrote his future.